Folks, a senior ranking member of the progressive Democrat establishment, a top Democrat political consultant and campaign strategist, in fact, by the names of James Carville, seems to have just accidentally exposed, really leaked, the Democrats' entire top secret anti-American agenda. I kid you not, seriously. I have a feeling that the Democrats don't want any of us to know what we're about to be talking about today. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about it and break it down. Ladies and gentlemen, this is, like I said, top Democrat political consultant and campaign strategist. He's been a boil on the side of the Democrat establishment for decades, longer than I've even been alive. His name is James Carville. You might have heard of him. Well, he just stated 2 days ago on the Left Wing podcast, it's called Polycon Left Wing Podcast, that when the Democrats get back in power, should they ever regain power in this country again, they plan to do the following. One, he said it himself. One, grant statehood to Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico so that the Democrats can then unlock 4 extra seats in the Senate. 2, they're going to pack the U.S. Supreme Court from 9 justices all the way up to 13 justices, adding another 4 radically progressive left-wing Supreme Court justices to the Supreme Court. 3, they want to reopen the U.S.-Mexico border and then grant mass amnesty to every single illegal alien currently residing inside of the United States of America. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is not some crazy right-wing conspiratorial, I don't know, these are not Fox News talking points. He said this himself on this left-wing podcast. It's called Polycon, and he is the senior-ranking Democrat establishment political consultant and campaign strategist. Now, he issued one more, he said this, I kid you not. He said this during this podcast. His advice to Democrat politicians moving forward, he said, don't run on any of this. Don't even talk about any of this. Just do it. Wow. His advice, Mr. Senior Ranking Democrat campaign strategist, he's been around for 50 years. His advice to the Democrat politicians moving forward, don't talk about packing the Supreme Court. Don't talk about statehood for D.C. or Puerto Rico. Don't campaign on or talk about reopening the border and granting amnesty. No. Win your elections, get into office, then do it. Then just do it. Don't talk about it because he knows.
Yeah, it's the same thing Spamberger did. That's exactly what his advice is.
If the Democrats are talking about any of this on the campaign trail, are they going to win any elections? Are Democrats going to be campaigning successfully on amnesty for every? No, nobody's going to vote for him. No right-minded American patriot's going to vote for any of this. So his advice is just effectively lie. Don't talk about any of this. Hide it. Keep it close to your chest. Keep your cards tucked away. Once you're in office, then once you're in a position of power, then just do all of this.
And then change election laws so you can keep winning. Hey, lady.
It is manipulation. It is deception of the highest caliber. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Carville said all of this just 2 days ago, like I said, on this far left podcast.
Yeah, we got to get the durkas out. I'm opening with this, but I got a lot on that issue.
Pretty much nobody listens to, other than me, I guess. Seriously, like literally no one listens to this podcast. He said all of this on, which is why I'm sure he was comfortable speaking freely about all of this. He never expected that we would be exposing him and the entire Democrat establishment right now. But we are. I'm sure he thought, well, because nobody listens to the podcast, I'm not going to get caught. It only had like 3,000 viewers. Okay. But we caught him. Now, enough about, let's move on here because we have some good news I want to share with you. Enough about the Democrats' America Last agenda, because today we actually have some massive positive updates pertaining to President Trump's America First agenda. In fact, I want you to take a look at this. Breaking news reported from CBS in the last 24 hours. They reported.
Oh, you got to see this. You know, the 7-Elevens, you always go in, there's foreign people running them. Watch this.
7-Eleven plans to close 645 stores in North America this year. Now, why do I say this is good news? What is going on here? Why are we even...
It's sort of like the farms. When I was a teenager, I used to work on farms. You know, I lived out in the country, and that was the best thing to do. It was good for you.
Talking about this. Well, the reason we're talking about this is really the reason why 7-Eleven is now closing 645 stores. Why is 7-Eleven closing all of these stores? Well, it's because of some Trump administration policies. Let me go ahead and try to explain all of this. One, many of the immigrants that had been owning and operating and working inside of these 7-Eleven stores, they can't get their small business association loans renewed. They've been cut off, which immigrants have been using and abusing, taking advantage of to take over entire
loans that we're paying for.
Industries inside of our country, like convenience.
A lot of those loans don't get paid back, and the taxpayers are left with the bill.
Stores or hotels. And the reason why they can't get their SBA loans renewed is because the Trump administration has implemented a new set of policies requiring that all SBA loan recipients, guess what, need to be USA citizens. You need to be a United States citizen if you want to get a small business administration loan. Long gone are the days of U.S. taxpayers subsidizing SBA loans for immigrants, some of whom are here illegally. Yes, illegal aliens have been getting these SBA loans. Not anymore. Shut it down. That's the first reason why this is happening. The second reason, well, now they can't staff these 7-Elevens with low-wage H-1B workers anymore because over the last 14 months, thanks to a series of Trump administration policies, we have seen a massive 90% reduction in new H-1B visas being handed out and an overall reduction in current total H-1B visas by 25% reduction. So 90% reduction in new H-1B visas going out. For current H-1B visas, 25% reduction. And as you
deport them all.
You all know, many of the workers working inside of these immigrant-owned establishments, they were here on H-1B
illegals
visas. We've all been fed this lie that H-1B visas are for highly skilled immigrants. We need them. They're the backbone of the American economy. We just don't have Americans smart enough to do these jobs. So we need H-1B workers from India. Well, actually, like 85 or 90% of H-1B recipients were not working in high skilled labor. They were working at places like 7-Eleven. No disrespect. Okay.
And they're also getting SNAP and crap like that. A lot of times they're working under the table as well.
But there's also a massive third reason. Thanks to the Make America Healthy initiative, you might have heard about it, the Trump administration has made it almost impossible to purchase junk food, chips, candy, soda pop, whatever. The Trump administration has made it almost impossible to purchase any of this junk food with taxpayer-funded food assistance cards like SNAP,
which we're paying for.
Fun fact here. Let's put this into perspective. In 2024, prior to President Trump's crackdown, the Maha crackdown, SNAP cards accounted for right around 12% of all grocery store sales overall, with that number being approximately 2 times higher in convenience stores like 7-Eleven. Folks, around 25% of all convenience store sales were conducted with SNAP cards and federally funded food assistance programs. Trump shut it down. You can still buy actual food, meat, potatoes, cheese, eggs. You just can't buy Doritos and Coca-Cola anymore. Cut it off. So this is exactly what we like to see. Okay, it's all of these reasons it's having a real world impact. Good. Guess what? Now that President Trump has shut down all of these taxpayer funded programs that immigrants.
I wonder how long after the Dems get back in power, they'll put all that stuff back and more. I worry about it.
Many of whom are here illegally, have been abusing to prop up their businesses. Now they are all getting run out of business, which is so weird. Because for decades now, we've all been told that immigrants have been able to take over and monopolize entire industries like convenience stores and hotels and various others by means of nothing other than their hardworking first generation immigrant magic powers or whatever. Have you heard that? But actually, as it would turn out, once you cut them off of their taxpayer funded gravy train, it doesn't really seem like they have what it takes to make it.
Yeah, and John, the other thing is they'll collapse the thing where Social Security will be gone for all those of us who work for it. You know, they're taking all the money out of the system that would be paying us in the future.
In the great American free market. Strange, really, isn't it? But you know what?
Either that or they'll just cause such high inflation, our money won't go as far as it did before anyways.
Frankly, I couldn't be happier about any of this. This is exactly what I voted for. Because if we want to put America first, guess what? We need to put Americans first. Every single SBA loan or whatever else that was being given, all of this federal funding that was being given to immigrants that perhaps
in money laundering
shouldn't even be here. Guess what? That's money or assistance or loans or whatever. That is not necessarily not be given to an actual American. So good. Shut this down. Get the country back on track. America first.
Amen on that. Well said. All right, I'm going to get on to the Iran stuff that's going on with the and everything. Long story.
Iranians are now hunting down IRGC members inside of Iran. Iranian economy is literally dying off in front of our eyes because of the US blockade. And now Iranian elites are losing the money that they had hidden away in foreign bank accounts. The US Treasury Department just launched a new operation, Economic Fury, that Iran was not expecting. Let's get into all that, starting of course with Iranians hunting down IRGC members. Just 2 nights ago, notorious Basij commander Muhammad was stabbed 14 times and killed by mass individuals.
Actually, since this video, I know of at least 20 or 30 more
near Tehran. We are likely seeing the rise of Iranians taking action with their own hands. This was something that was literally confirmed by an IRGC member last night, because the same night this assassination took place, multiple car bombs went off across Tehran. Initially, these bombs were very confusing for the media because we didn't know if this was car bombs going off or just strikes from US or Israeli forces restarting, because as you guys know, a ceasefire is in effect. But guess what? An IRGC Basij commander himself published a video basically confirming that these were car bombs set off by people who were against the regime. Basically hostile actors. That's what the Islamic Republic likes to call them. Take a listen.
Brothers, there are no casualties tonight. No one was killed. No one was injured. Everything is normal. The situation is under control. Don't worry, nothing happened. There are no casualties at all. Everything is fine. Brothers, God protect you.
Now, this tells us a couple of things. First of all, there's clearly a resistance group inside of Iran, and they're becoming more and more active. But we're still not seeing protests that we saw back in January. And the reason behind this is...
Yeah, I got a video of those protests.
The Iranian regime has still shut down the internet. The regime is terrified of a repeat of January, and that's why they don't want people coordinating.
And that's why they need the Strait open, so they can have the money, so they can pay for all these proxies to come in and keep all the people in line.
And communicating with each other, and they don't want Iranians communicating with the outside world. The internet shutdown has now passed 1100 hours. That's more than 47 days as I'm recording this. By the time you guys watch the video, it's more than 48 days. Over 90 million people are literally just cut off from the rest of the world. This is something we have never seen before. 48 days makes it the longest internet shutdown in modern history. I guess we didn't really have internet back in the day, so it's certainly the longest internet shutdown in history. And during all this, the regime crackdown has only increased. Executions are still ongoing, and they're arresting dozens, multiple dozens of people every single day just for criticizing the regime. They're even confiscating all the assets these people have just because they put out a statement saying they're not happy with this war. But you see, unfortunately for the IRGC, more and more people are going to start showing their unhappiness very quickly. That's because there's an economic disaster brewing inside of Iran. Let me show you what I mean. These are the warnings that are coming from inside the government. Iran's central bank is warning the government that the recovery from this war could take up to 12 years. Since the US blockade started, Iranian oil revenues have basically disappeared. And that's the revenue that the regime depended on very, very heavily. And also the internet blackout that we just talked about is also
That's how they keep everyone locked down.
draining money out of the economy. How are
They're using 12-year-olds at inspection points, checkpoints.
people supposed to transact?
Soon that'll be gone too.
How are people supposed to put an online order or use their credit card or go somewhere when they can't access the internet? And it doesn't look like any of this is getting better anytime soon. Take a look at what Admiral Brad Cooper just put out yesterday. A blockade of Iranian ports has been fully implemented as US forces maintain maritime superiority in the Middle East. An estimated 90% of Iran's economy is fueled by international trade by sea. In less than 36 hours since the blockade was implemented, US forces have completely halted economic trade going into and out of Iran by sea. The economy is literally being choked off. Now, this is where I want to remind you guys that we talked about how Iran had very limited spare oil capacity.
And now they can't. If they can't get the oil out, they got to stop pumping, which is gonna. They won't be able to restart for a long time.
Meaning they only had so many empty oil depots where they could store the oil.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's going to talk about.
That they are pumping out of the ground. That's important because now that there's a blockade in effect, Iran cannot ship that oil out of the country. They cannot ship it to their customers. And that means they're running out of storage every single day. Very soon, regime will have to decide if they want to shut down the oil fields, basically stop pumping out the oil. And that has long-term consequences because when you shut off a field that's running at full capacity, 5 to 10% of that oil becomes permanently inaccessible. There's some engineering reason behind it where the water gets into the oil when you shut it off, and that means oil at the bottom, it basically becomes unusable for a long time. And that's why regime really doesn't want to shut off the oil field because they're literally losing hundreds of millions of dollars because 5-10
Plus, their equipment's really old. You know, and the newer stuff, they could run some heat and steam through there that would evaporate the water out of it.
10% of Iranian oil is a lot of money, and if they shut off the oil because they run out of oil depots, well, that's going to cost them a lot of money that they cannot afford to lose. Take a listen. Here's more details.
Full news on inflation and currency valuation. Here's more from the researcher who did all of the analysis that I've been keeping up with.
They have probably around 13 to 15 for 16 days enough storage for oil, to store oil that they can't export. When they run out of storage, then they're going to have to drop oil extraction. Dropping oil extraction is going to cause not just damage to their oil exportation or extraction volume in the long run, but it's also going to lead to unemployment rate increasing. It's the heart of Iran's economy. It accounts for 70-80% of Iran's revenue that it uses to run the government operations.
Now here's another thing to keep in mind. When the Islamic Revolution happened in 1979, one of the big reasons the Shah's government collapsed was because in late 1978 the oil fields stopped producing, and very soon after that exports stopped going out of the country. The money stopped flowing in, and that spiraled into something that the Shah couldn't control. By mid-January, he literally had to flee the country, and he never returned after that.
It's amazing how close to what his son looks like his father.
Khomeini took over the country and the Islamic Republic
a lot
was born.
alike.
Well, we could see something like
Really
that
a
happening right now. If oil revenue stops coming in for a long time, how does regime pay IRGC members? How are they going to pay the besieged members? How are they going to pay old field workers? The massive infrastructure that they have built, well, guess what? The money is just going to stop flowing. Now, this is where I have something for you guys. If you're interested in the history of Iran and what lesson, total 10 Iranian vessels have tried getting through the US blockade, and each time they were
Now, there was one very early today.
unsuccessful. The best part of this
I'm gonna play some video on that.
story
too.
is that Central Command is literally giving us play-by-play updates of how they are stopping these Iranian vessels. And take a listen to what they published yesterday. An Iranian vessel tried hugging the coastline to slip past into the Indian Ocean, probably heading to China to sell the oil it was carrying. This is when USS Prince successfully redirected it, and the vessel was forced to go back to Iran. You know, nothing coming in, nothing coming out. As if this wasn't bad enough already for the Iran's dying economy, the US Treasury Department has launched a new operation alongside Epic Fury, and it has a very unique name, Economic Fury. Before we get into what this operation really is and how it's hurting a regime's bank account, just a quick reminder to hit the like and subscribe button down below. It truly does help us out in the algorithm, and it helps us reach more people so they can see, well, that's expiring in the next couple of days, and Treasury Department says it will not be renewed. In simple words, the sanctions relief that we talked about roughly a month ago, well, that's going to disappear, and it's going to become harder for Iranians to sell their oil, basically find a buyer. Now, just yesterday when this operation kicked off, the Treasury Department sent letters directly to banks in China, Hong Kong.
This also hurts China because they're getting their oil at a reduced rate by a lot.
And the UAE and some other Middle Eastern countries. And this is where a situation kind of gets worse for Iran because they made it worse for themselves. You see, Iran has been attacking all these Gulf countries that have nothing to do with this war. They never gave permission to the United States to use their airspace. But guess what? Before this war started, Iran was dependent on some of these countries, more specifically the UAE, to basically transact around the world. They were using the UAE and the financial system that the country has to get around US sanctions. And now you could say UAE has an added incentive to work with US authorities to make sure Iranians are not able to get around sanctions. And that's gonna make life hell for the Iranian regime, and more specifically for Iranian elites and Iranian officials who are, you know, storing some money overseas just like as a rainy day fund. In case the government collapses and they have to flee the country, they wanted to keep a few million, maybe a few.
They're keeping a lot of their people poor so they can use that money to get them to do whatever they want.
$100 million overseas as a safety net. It seems that safety net is about to disappear. Here's more details. Take a listen.
Yeah, I think that's not a correct characterization. Yesterday, we announced Operation Economic Fury, and we, for over a year, we have had maximum pressure on the Iranians, both on blocking payments into Iranian state and going after the accounts of the IRGC. One of what may prove to be fatal mistakes that the Iranians made was bombing their GCC.
From what I'm hearing from the people in Iran, and that this is having some effect. That a lot of the people are stepping down now and not going to help them enforce their reign of power.
Neighbors, and who are now
they're getting more and more desperate over there.
All willing to be much more transparent in terms of the.
Oh, and there's actually 5 factions that are kind of squabbling with each other.
Funds, or do a deeper dive in investigating the funds that are held within their banking systems. So we have pushed out to them the request that we want to freeze more funds of the leadership of the IRGC and any members of Iranian leadership. The other thing that we have done is we have told countries that if you are buying Iranian oil, that if Iranian money is sitting in your banks, we are now willing to apply secondary sanctions, which is a very stern measure. And the Iranians should know that this is going to be the financial equivalent of what we saw in the kinetic activities.
Now, on the diplomatic front, talks are still ongoing, and we're hoping for either upcoming.
No, they're not going to go anywhere with that. They're just stalling on the Iranian side. So we're going to get boom booms.
Summit where peace deal could be negotiated, or maybe an extension.
The problem is if they go back and they sign a deal, they'll get killed by a lot of the people there. They've been putting this propaganda on their TVs, this and that they were just about to step on American soil and conquer us.
To the ceasefire. Now, yesterday we learned that it doesn't look like that the United States and Iran would be meeting this week. The hope is the meeting will be next week. Now, yesterday, Pakistan's general or army chief Asim Munir did go to Tehran to basically present the U.S. demands to Iranians and figure out what the next step could be. Now, a couple of the U.S. demands that we do know about are...
If that's the guy I see on TV all the time, oh, he's annoying.
...are pretty simple. Take a look. U.S. is asking Tehran to open up the Strait of Hormuz because this is something that's really part of the ceasefire. US stopped the bombing, and in return, Tehran promised to open up the Strait of Hormuz, but they really haven't done that so far. The second point that the US is asking for is basically next time an Iranian
Problem is they're divided. There's some that are attacking and some that want to do that.
delegation comes to another country to negotiate a peace deal, US wants to make sure that that delegation actually has the power to negotiate a deal and sign a deal, because that's what happened last time when, after 20 hours of negotiations, US figured out that the people who are in the room actually don't really have a power to agree to anything. And that's when talks basically paused and Iran was able to go back home, talk with whoever has the real power. Maybe it's the supreme leader, maybe it's someone else, and then come back with a final deal. Well, now it seems that meeting is coming up. Here we have more details.
Afternoon. It's been 46 days since Operation Epic Fury began, and the ceasefire between the United States and Iran is holding as diplomatic efforts play out. The president indicated this week that talks could resume in the coming days between negotiators, possibly in Islamabad. Overnight on Fox News, he spoke about the limited economic impact of the war and said he sees the conflict.
This is actually the first meeting that he's talking about. This is a few days ago.
As close to over. The president's comments come as the Iranians say that
I got a newer video about the new talks.
messages are still being exchanged between the two sides.
The exchange of messages continues from the very day, Sunday, when the delegation of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
They're stalling so they can. They got a lot of their missiles buried with the bombings, but they can dig them out, and they're working 24/7, and they're close to having them out. That's why they're stalling.
Returned to Tehran. Until today, numerous messages have been exchanged through a Pakistani intermediary. Our positions have been made very clear, both there during negotiations as well as in those exchanges.
These remarks from the Iranian force.
What they tend to do in negotiating with them is they'll get some gold, and then they say, well, we also want this, and then you get that, and then they also want this. They just keep it going.
Ministry spokesperson were
They try to use fatigue. They try to wear you out.
made as U.S. Central Command continues to block
They figure the longer this runs, the better it is for them.
Iranian ports with more than a dozen support vessels. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper explained the impact of this move, saying, quote, a blockade of Iranian ports has been fully implemented as U.S. forces maintain maritime superiority in the Middle East. An estimated 90% of Iran's economy is fueled by international trade by sea. In less than 36 hours since the blockade was implemented, U.S. forces have completely halted economic trade going into and out of.
Now, there was a ship today that they did shoot, and they damaged the engine room, and then they overtook the ship. They've got it in custody.
Iran by sea. As Fox previously reported, there are thousands of additional U.S. forces headed to the region, the majority of them aboard the USS George H.W. Bush aircraft carrier strike group. Now, diplomatic efforts are playing out, but those military preparations continue with more transport planes and cargo planes arriving in the Middle East each day.
Yep, here we go. Here's some video of the first uprising when all this started to go up. They've had other uprisings, but they've shot him and killed him and tortured him and put him in jails. And this uprising was even bigger, where they killed between 40 and 50,000 people, just gunned them down. Now, this is happening in every city there.
Massive crowds have taken to the street in Tehran, but these aren't protesters against the regime. These are regime supporters. Now they're losing their minds because they can't believe that Iran just surrendered. That's why they're protesting against the people in power, people who are.
Oh, I thought this was the other video, but this is the one where the durka people are out there protesting against their leaders because they're on their TV. They were telling them crap on how they had won and everything like that.
Negotiating with the United States, and they're calling on the supreme leader to finally make a statement. It's been more than a month since the supreme leader has been elected, and the Iranian public still hasn't heard from him or seen him. And now it seems like the regime has fallen into a full-on civil war. Politicians are turning on each other. Military is turning against people who are negotiating with the United States, and people are losing faith in everyone. So let's get into exactly what happened. Now, they
actually want to kill some of them for even talking to USA. because they think they're going to overrun the USA.
Everyone who missed our video yesterday,
They will with the illegal immigration.
this was the statement that started it all. Yesterday, Iran's foreign minister put out this statement saying that in line with the ceasefire in Lebanon, passage for all commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz is declared completely open for the remaining period of the ceasefire. This statement was a shock for people all around the world, including people inside the Iranian government itself. We're now seeing parliament leaders, IRGC commanders speaking out against what the foreign minister said. They said they cannot believe it. Some are calling for his impeachment, and some are calling for worse. Here's a report on what's happening inside of Iran.
Yeah, they want to kill him
Right now, the Islamic Republic is showing a major internal fracture at the highest levels in real time. After Aragachi and Trump both claimed that the Strait of Hormuz is open, IRGC-linked media is now openly questioning officials, warning of confusion inside the country, and demanding explanation for the silence. At the same time, IRGC messaging via state TV makes clear that the passage is still controlled, restricted, and under IRGC oversight. Across the regime's support base, pro-Basij and pro-IRGC aligned channels are fuming, with visible anger over this so-called agreement to open the Strait of Hormuz. This exposes a direct contradiction between the diplomatic narrative and the military reality. Even regime-aligned media is now signaling that something doesn't add up. And this is something we were talking about just a few weeks ago before the negotiations started. Iran doesn't have a government now. Iran has multiple different power bases, and the United States is negotiating with the strongest power base, but nonetheless, that doesn't discount the fact that there are still other people with power inside of Iran, and their incentives, their goals are different than the people who are.
And then within those factions, they're kind of squabbling with each other because a lot of their top people were killed off and this and that, and maybe the second person in power wasn't that powerful, and they're trying to scheme to take over power from them.
Actually negotiating. Everyone is trying to make sure that they come out on top after this war is done. And in doing so, they want to make sure that the other guy doesn't get the benefit of the ceasefire, other guy doesn't get the benefit of ending the war, because whoever is negotiating with the United States definitely has upper hand when it comes to ruling the country after this war is over. And that's why we are now seeing other factions basically trying to bring each other down. This country could literally fall into a civil war. And as I said before, all the while this is happening, Iran's new supreme leader still hasn't put out a single statement in audio.
Most likely he's dead.
Or video form. We have not heard his voice, and we have not seen him basically since this war started. He could be in a coma, or maybe he's just dead. We don't know. He has put out a couple of text-based statements, but someone else is reading them. How do we know that's actually coming from the supreme leader? If I have learned anything about Iran, I'm more likely to believe that that statement is definitely not coming from the supreme leader, and the Iranian state media is just lying. You know, I could be writing those statements. You guys don't know that. We don't know who the supreme leader is and where he is. Now, for Iran's foreign minister, things are not looking good. And the situation was made worse by the statements that were put out by President Trump and US Central Command. You see, after the foreign minister told the world that the Strait of Hormuz is open, Central Command put out a statement of its own saying that the US naval blockade is still continuing. It doesn't matter what Iran is doing. Iranian ports are not going to be used by any ships at all.
We're cutting off their money. And those ships going back and forth, some of them were transporting weapons.
Then we had President Trump basically repeat the same message.
A lot of the drones were coming in that way.
Now, I'm sure you guys can see why to Iranians this looks like a complete surrender. Iran only had one leverage, the Strait of Hormuz. And the foreign minister publicly gave away that leverage while not getting pretty much anything in return. There's no long-term peace deal, and the US blockade is still ongoing.
And that's why they wanted to kill him.
The Iranian economy is still crashing. And this is exactly why even people who work with the foreign minister, his politician buddies, are publicly speaking out against him. Take a look at this lawmaker who's calling for the impeachment of the foreign minister. An Iranian lawmaker, Mostaza Mahoudi, said Foreign Minister Abbas Aragachi would face impeachment over his social media remarks, accusing him of repeating ill-timed statements during a sensitive wartime period. In a post on Twitter, Mahmoudi said that if it weren't for the excuse of war, Aragachi would have been impeached for his Twitter message. He said this was not the first time the foreign minister has made what he described as strange and untimely statements during critical moments, adding that such remarks had an impact on global oil and energy markets. Now, I don't know who this guy is. I don't follow domestic Iranian politics, but nonetheless, this guy clearly has power in domestic politics, and he does have a point. Take a look at this graph. These were oil prices yesterday, right after Aragachi's statement. They plunged to below $90 for first time in a long time. They were above $100 a barrel that morning, and they dropped as low as $83 because of the Strait of Hormuz being open. Because of that news. In a way, this was the Iranian leverage. If Iran can shut down the Strait of Hormuz, oil prices spike, and that creates domestic and international pressure on Trump to back off or give Iran concessions during negotiations. But now that the prices are coming down, the pressure on the United States is disappearing. And let's be honest here, militarily speaking, Iran just doesn't matter. Iran has no military power left whatsoever.
The price of the fuel is the only lever they have.
The only power they have is the drones they can use to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. But because of the statement from Iran's foreign...
And it looks like we're cutting off those going in, because they were going in, a lot of them are going on in and out of the ships. Not all of them. Some are being somewhat manufactured there, although they've taken out most of the factories for that. If he cuts off the power, then they won't be able to make any.
Minister, that leverage has weakened severely. This is exactly why the Iranian society is turning against the people who are negotiating, including the foreign minister who put out that statement. And I'm really being honest about that. That statement we looked at from the politician, that was not an isolated incident. Here's another person, another politician speaking out, doing the same thing. This time we have Ayatollah Mosrani, former culture minister. He warned on Friday that Iran risks losing strategic advantage in information warfare if it fails to act quickly during sensitive moments. If the Supreme National Security Council, that's the highest body in Iran, does not appoint a capable spokesperson and does not speak in timely manner during sensitive and necessary moments, and does not take the initiative in shaping the first narrative, we will suffer great harm in psychological warfare and the war of narratives. In simple words, this guy is saying that Iran is losing the propaganda war, and that was one of the few spaces that Iran had some hope in. And that's exactly why he's pissed. But let's be honest here. Iran may be losing the propaganda war, but they are trying their best. They are going down swinging. And if you don't believe me, look at this piece of propaganda that they put out at the start of the war. It's not the best, but you can clearly tell that whoever made it tried his best. He or she put their heart into this piece. It's basically a modern day Mona Lisa. So take a look. Here we go again. Iranian accounts are now claiming they shot down a B-2 Spirit over Tehran. And here's someone just casually driving around a $2 billion bomber through the city on a flatbed. In reality, Iran doesn't have the technology to take down a B-2, but let's just assume they were able to take one down. A B-2 bomber flies at 50,000 feet. A bomber taken down that high usually doesn't land on the ground all intact. Now, you would think that people would know that this is fake, but Central Command actually had to come out and confirm that all 4 B-2s that struck Iran are on their way back home to the Whiteman Air Force Base. Now, if you guys haven't been following our coverage on
Yeah, I'm seeing other stuff that they're putting on their TV there. This and that. That's like they're getting ready to land on our shores and stuff with all their big ships and that's coming. So it's that ridiculous what they're putting on their TVs. That's why they're so angry about even making any deal with America. They think they're about to take America.
Negotiate with the United States. Well, that guy had to come out and put out a statement basically saying that, hey, whatever.
Of course, they're cutting off all other information coming in the best they can. They can't totally cut it out, but they're cutting a lot of it out.
Whatever the Iranian foreign minister said, whatever President Trump is saying, all of that doesn't count. Take a look at his statement. Number 1, the President of the United States made 7 claims in 1 hour, all 7 of which were false. They did not win the war with these lies, and they will certainly not get anywhere in negotiations either. With the continuation of the US blockade, the Strait of Hormuz will not remain open. Passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be conducted based on designated route and with Iranian authorization. Whether the strait is open or closed, and the regulations governing it will be determined by the field, not by social media. The way he's
I'm surprised how long they're holding on, because they were financially in bad shape before this started.
Talking about social media, like it wasn't his boy who put out that statement in the first place. Aragachi put out his statement before President Trump saying that the Strait of Hormuz is open. But this is where the Iranian politics has come to. No one knows who's in charge. But nonetheless, I do want to provide more
I think likely maybe they got some advances on money that, on future oil deliveries of some of it.
context to a couple of points that he mentioned. First of all, a couple of ships have already gone through the Strait of Hormuz using the normal route. So they went through the middle of the strait. They did not go through the route that Iran has been forcing ships to take. And that does tell us a lot of things. But first, I know a couple of ships don't really mean a lot. Hundreds of ships were going through the strait every single day. So a couple of ships is not going to change the global oil crisis. It's not going to fix it in any way. But
Oh, that's a good one, John. CNN writing their thing. They're probably over there in their newsroom helping them write it.
it does tell us one important thing. These ships went through the routes where Iran was saying
They got some AI stuff with they got their boats loaded up and they're getting ready to hit our shores. They actually have some AI stuff like that. They got troops in their ships and they're going to land and they're going to have these planes drop people in parachute and all this and that on our shores. And then they say, oh, we're making peace with America. That's why the population of the durka part, the 5% that's durkas, are so upset. They were ready. They were all excited about taking all the money from here in America.
that they had sea mines. But yesterday, literally minutes after the foreign minister put out his statement, one cruise ship that was stuck at Dubai for 47 years, it just said, F it, I'm going through, I'm making a run for it. And it went through the middle of the Strait of Hormuz, and now it's in international waters. So it does tell us that maybe there are no sea mines, or maybe there is a specific route in the middle of the strait that you can use and you will be safe. I feel like they will become important later. But nonetheless, here's the second big point. Remember this guy. This is the same Ghalibaf guy, the Speaker of the Parliament in Iran, who said last week that he's not going to go to Pakistan to negotiate with the United States unless there's a ceasefire in Lebanon. And guess what? Last week, there was no ceasefire in Lebanon, and he still went to Pakistan and negotiated. The ceasefire in Lebanon happened yesterday, or I think 2 days.
Well, right now there is a ceasefire, and there looks like they're both coming to the White House and probably going to sign stuff.
Ago. So this guy has a habit.
The leader of Lebanon's not the issue; it's Hamas.
Of lying, and that's probably what he's doing here. Or maybe he's trying to make up for the chaos that's happening inside of Iran. They negotiated with the United States. They said, hey, Strait of Hormuz is open. And then they saw the backlash from the public, from the IRGC, and from other politicians. And now they're trying to go back on their word so they can maintain their grip on power. Now, this is where I want to share with you guys something interesting. And it relates to the Speaker of Parliament's Twitter account. Because it seems someone here in the United States is actually behind.
Would I stop it? I actually hit a button. I'm sorry.
The tweets that this guy is putting out. And the reason for this is because some of the tweets that this Ghalibaf guy was putting out over this war, they were just too on the nose for the American culture. It seemed like someone who knew how American psychology worked was maintaining this Twitter account, was putting out these tweets. And guess what? Iranian Wire just did an investigation into it, and they found out that the speculation was true. And they also found out who could it be and where he lives. So let's take a look at this investigative report. Meet the man behind Ghalibaf's Twitter account. Since the war started, this account has posted almost daily, sometimes in English, sometimes peppered with emojis or Gen Z memes, directly addressing the American public. Observers have noted the sophisticated English, the grasp of American psyche, and the use of internet subculture. This suggested an advisor who's fluent in English and belongs to Iran's third generation. This is the generation that belong to Iranian elite families who are part of the Islamic regime. But the third generation doesn't actually live in Iran. They are, a lot more cosmopolitan. So they live all around the world.
Some of the real big topwigs got out of the country right just before it started or when it started.
So they understand the international.
They went to Australia, England, and a lot in Canada. A lot of them are up here in Canada.
Culture, more specifically the Western culture. Now, according to this investigation, the guy running this account is Mesam Zaman Badi. He lives in Glendale, California. He comes from a family that's connected to the regime, and he has a history of running pro-regime media networks in the past. In fact, he used to advise
Propaganda.
Galiba personally in 2003, and probably for a long time after that. We don't exactly know when he gave up that position, but it seems he might be back in that position, helping the country that he feels his loyalty with during a time of war. Now, it is kind of hypocritical for the person to love the Islamic regime so much, but live in California. He wants to protect a regime so the regime can continue ruining the lives of 92 million Iranians. All the while, he wants to live here in the United States, which apparently is a country that the Islamic regime thinks is the great Satan. That means this is
Now, a few from California that were durkas, they've deported Trump.
Just yet another perfect example of the hypocrisy that we have covered all around the world. Chinese elites, the CCP politicians, have their families here in the West, sometimes even here in the United States. Same with Russian elites. Russian oligarchs literally beg the United States government to not put them on sanctions list. And then same thing with Iran. While the regime is basically brutalizing the Iranian people, their kids are living overseas and they don't want to go back. They want to protect the regime, but they don't want to go back. I hope everyone who supports the Islamic regime sees the hypocrisy in all this. But nonetheless, there is extreme amount of chaos happening inside of Iran, especially at the top level, and only time will tell what happens in the future. So be sure to hit the subscribe button down below, and I'll see you.
There's some assassinations happening between them a bit, and it's not getting out in the news and not out into our media yet. People over there are telling me that some of them are doing hit jobs on each other. You know, a little bit lower level, but it's going to work its way up. This is a video I thought I was playing. This is what happened, I believe, back in January.
The US locked the Strait of Hormuz, and without firing a single shot, a civil war
All right, this isn't bad. It's another one about protesting.
began in Tehran. Generals against diplomats, diplomats against generals, and the people against both. The regime has stopped acting like a single country. 3 different powers, 3 different strategies, 3 different survival plans. And none of them accepts the other.
Actually, there's about 5 factions, actually. I'm being told there's 5, and there's 3 of them that are the more powerful ones.
Iran has less than 2 weeks left. The government wants to surrender. The IRGC wants escalation. But
RIGC is the ones that had the guns, so they have the power.
their military options are exhausted. And unless they accept the terms, the regime is heading straight toward annihilation. And the streets are burning. Fuel lines, shuttered shops, death to the dictator chants. Washington is in no hurry, because time is working against Iran. And what this trap has created inside the regime is a civil war. The US engineered all of this. Understanding the strategic trap the US has set for Iran is essential, because what Washington is doing is not a conventional military operation. This is something far more ingenious. The US doesn't want to defeat Iran, it wants Iran to defeat itself. The blockade was designed as a 3-dimensional weapon. The military layer stops ships, the economic layer cuts off oil and imports, the psychological layer shatters the regime's internal cohesion. And the third layer is the most devastating. The US is keeping normal commercial traffic through Hormuz open. The world economy is unharmed. Only Iran is isolated. And every possible...
They've been having gas leaks, John, that buildings have been going up on when we're not even bombing them right now. Gas leaks, and people are in these buildings where these gas leaks are. In other words, they're targeting those places with IEDs and stuff.
response from Iran makes the situation worse. According to intelligence-based assessments, Iran's oil storage will fill within 10 to 14 days. And when that clock runs out, the regime will have no options left. Whatever it does, it loses.
They're about 4 days into it already, so...
Whatever it doesn't do, it loses. The blockade has exposed 2 wings inside the regime, and those 2 wings are now at war with each other. The first wing, the IRGC core, wants asymmetric escalation, mine-laying, cyber attacks, proxy operations, missile fire. The second wing, Foreign Ministry heavy, the Pezeshkian government, technocrats, wants to step back. Negotiation table, indirect talks, some kind of face-saving deal. According
The ones with the guns are the ones that kind of have the most power right now, but they're all squabbling with each other. I'm not sure which ones control the money. That's what'll matter, because they're actually handing out money on the streets to get them to protest and use themselves as human shields so we don't blow up power plants and stuff like that. They're actually handing out cash. They're also handing out cash to people that are coming in from Iran or from Afghanistan and Iraq.
According to Iran International's
Pakistan,
reporting,
that's
this
much.
clash had been advancing quietly for 2 years. The start of the blockade and the
Oh, when did
collapse
that
of the
happen?
IRGC operation
I'm out on that. Mass shooting in 10 dead. I seen something happen in England the other day. A stabbing, a whole bunch of people got stabbed in England too. In fact, I got some videos on it. I haven't played them. How long ago did that happen there, Pat? How long did that happen, and who did it?
became the critical moment for which way the balance would tip. Understanding what the IRGC is
I'd almost bet money that it's going to be a leftist.
requires attention, because the IRGC is not just an army. It controls an estimated 30 to 40% of Iran's.
It's Sunday, so they do it at a school. They did it on a Sunday. It wouldn't have been a regular school or at a church, not a school.
Economy, construction, telecommunications, oil, banking. This is not a military force, it's an
haven't seen
economic
it yet either.
empire. And the IRGC has relied on a doctrine for years, the resistance
And I usually get messages, but then again, I haven't looked at them for about an hour.
economy. Whatever comes from outside will endure. But this doctrine had never been tested at this scale. Now
I'm glad, so we don't have to pay for the damn shooter going out. But I hope that they don't lock down, take down, scrub the social media so we can find out their background.
it's being tested, and it's cracking. Because resistance economy was a slogan. In reality, the IRGC's networks were dependent on international trade. The blockade exposed that dependency. The IRGC's existential crisis lies right
They're already low on money, so this blockade is really hurting them really quick. Because they were handing out cash to get people to come in to oppress their people, because their own people weren't, when a lot of them left, and their own people didn't want to do it either, because they got a regular army and the RIGC is what they have. So the only ones that are in control of the RIGC, the nutcakes, and that's less than 5% of the population.
here. Stepping back means losing the revolutionary identity. The negotiation table means the questioning
Oh,
of
I
their
didn't
very
see
reason for existence. The revolutionary
I'm surprised, Pat, that I didn't get that message from someone.
guards cannot exist without conflict. Their entire legitimacy is built on resistance.
If you get a link, maybe I'll put it up on the screen here, Pat, if you get a link on it. And we'll show it to everybody.
As First Post reported, Commander Ahmad Vahidi's insistence is not ideological, it's existential. But while the IRGC calls for escalation, it's rotting from within. Salary delays have started.
They sure do live a lot in the tunnels.
Its own personnel salaries. When revenue lines are cut, an economic empire decays from the inside. And the IRGC's attempt to break the blockade has already collapsed. Its own operation sinking in 20 minutes means making the escalation call from a position of lost credibility. On the other side stands President Pezeshkian, not a reformist, a pragmatist within the system. He wants to save the regime, not change it. According to exclusive
I don't want to save it. I want the people that overthrow them. And that's going to happen. It's just how and when.
information reaching our sources, his words, "We're weeks away from collapse," leaked from behind closed doors, probably intentionally.
Cutting off their money is the biggest way to make them go down, though.
He's accusing the IRGC of destroying the economy,
Okay,
saying
I'll check it
regional
out here.
attacks
Hold
are
on.
eliminating any chance of ceasefire. But the IRGC isn't listening, because for the
copy and
IRGC,
paste.
stepping
Let me
back
see.
isn't a tactical decision,
Pat.
it's an existential surrender. Foreign Minister Arakchi is alone at the table. According to the Jerusalem Post, every diplomatic move is being vetoed by the IRGC. The diplomatic wing's tragedy is this. To sit at the negotiation table, they must accept that the blockade is working. But that acceptance is the same as saying, the enemy won. And any government that says this faces the IRGC's charge of treason. The diplomats are making a secret move to escape this deadlock. They're trying to pull Artesh, Iran's regular army, to their side. According to the Critical Threats report, Artesh is separate from the
That shows that was only posted 4 minutes ago.
IRGC and unhappy. Some commanders have started voicing their discontent. If this alliance is formed, the regime's internal balance of power completely breaks. But this is a gamble, because the IRGC could read Artesh's movement as a coup attempt. And when the IRGC reads something as a coup, its response is sharp. Washington knows this. That's why it's waiting. In 1979, there was also a regime. It looked powerful from the outside, but was rotting from within.
Well, they had a news
Back then
conference,
too, generals, diplomats, and people had turned on each other. And back then too, nobody predicted the collapse would come so fast. And in Tehran, there aren't just two wings. There's a third force, and the regime fears it most of all. What's happening on the street is far more dangerous than the corridor fights.
He was related to the people he shot.
Iran's social contract has collapsed. For years, there was a silent agreement between the regime and the people. No democracy, but cheap gasoline. Heavy ideology, but basic needs met.
I know why the news media isn't covering it, it's because he can't use it.
The blockade tore that agreement apart. No gasoline, no diesel, daily power cuts. According to Al Jazeera's reporting, inflation has exceeded, salaries are delayed. Basic needs have become unaffordable. History is repeating itself. 2009, 2017, 2019, 2022. Every major protest in Iran was economically triggered. Gasoline hike, bread price, currency collapse. Every time the street erupted faster than expected, was crushed harder than expected, and the regime aged a little more each time. The current economic pressure is heavier than all of those combined. From Tabriz to Tehran, Isfahan to Shiraz, protests are no longer in a single city. They've spread across the country. Women and youth are on the front lines. The post-Mahsa Amini generation is no longer afraid. For this generation, the regime isn't even legitimate. Death to the dictator chants are rising on every corner. Shops are shuttering. Truck drivers are stopped on the roads. They can't find fuel, and those who do can't afford it. Factories are shutting down because energy has been cut. Hospital generator fuel is running out. Daily life has begun to collapse, and this paralysis deepens with every passing day. And this geographic spread is creating a lethal problem for the regime. In previous protests, uprisings were concentrated in a few major cities. The IRGC could suppress them by piling forces there. But now, protests are erupting in dozens of cities simultaneously. The regime's suppression capacity is being overwhelmed. It can't send troops everywhere at once. While it crushes one city, another ignites. Pezeshkian's position is impossible. He needs to calm the people.
The good people need some guns soon.
But has no tools.
Actually, they do have some, they just don't have enough.
He needs to restrain the IRGC, but has no authority. And the IRGC is ordering harsh intervention on the streets, but it already has a recruitment problem. If it can't send men to the front, is it going to fight in the streets too? The people trust neither Pezeshkian nor Vahidi. They're rejecting the regime itself. In the protests, chants of "the army is with the people" are rising. This slogan isn't just a wish, it's an open call to Artesh. And there's a time threshold where all these cracks converge. According to intelligence-based assessments, within 10 to 14 days, Iran's oil storage capacity will be full. When storage fills, wells must shut down, and a shut well doesn't reopen with the flip of a switch. Reservoir pressure drops, geological damage begins. Some wells take months to recover.
So at maximum, they've got about a week. If they don't get the oil out of there, they're going to be in some serious trouble.
Some never do. The blockade isn't just cutting exports, it's permanently degrading Iran's long-term production capacity. And the refinery paradox kicks in. Iran is the world's
But the only other thing they could do is just pump it on the ground, I suppose. That's going to really mess up their area.
fourth largest oil producer, but its refining capacity can't cover its own production. It has to export crude and import refined gasoline and diesel. Both sides of that loop are now blocked. Nothing going out, nothing coming in. In a country that produces oil, lines form at gas stations.
There you go, John.
This absurd picture hits the regime's most sensitive nerve, because Iran's social contract breaks at precisely this point. The silent agreement between regime and people was always economic. No freedom but cheap gas, no democracy but bread on the table. That agreement is now torn. This clock is cornering everyone. Diplomats say, urgent negotiation. The IRGC says, hold. But neither can stop the clock. The IRGC calls for endurance, but can't pay its own personnel's salaries. Pezeshkian wants negotiation, but the IRGC blocks every step.
No matter.
When the clock runs out, the ones who will decide won't be the generals or the diplomats. It will be the street.
Bridal shower.
The internal collapse is spilling outward. As the IRGC's economic empire shrinks, the money flowing to proxy networks is drying up. According to the Belfer Center's analysis, Hezbollah was already in rebuilding mode after losing its supply lines. The Houthis had shifted to a harder negotiation line after 2 years of accumulated blows. Iraqi militias had already retreated under pressure from the Baghdad government, and all these organizations saw something. Iran couldn't last 20 minutes in its own territorial waters. Tehran's deterrence was tested at its own strait, and it collapsed. Houthi leadership is running the math right now. Does escalating in the Red Sea save Tehran?
So really, time is on our side. Just keep that thing shut, and they're going to collapse.
Or will we face an Israeli-American strike on our own? Hezbollah is running the same math in Beirut. The last 2 years of losses have already given them the answer. If Tehran can't guarantee our security, why are we dying for Tehran? Once that question is asked, it cannot be unasked.
You had what?
According to Iran International's reporting, Hezbollah wanted money from Tehran for rebuilding. That money is no longer flowing. Iraqi militias were counting on Tehran's political support against Baghdad's pressure. That support now isn't even a phone call away. The proxy network isn't unraveling, it's evaporating. And the people are giving their answer on the streets. Proxies no, bread yes. Tehran has been pouring billions into Beirut, Sana'a, Baghdad for years, while its own people wait in gasoline lines. This contradiction can no longer be hidden. The axis of resistance built over years was fed not by military might, but by perception. That perception is now broken. And broken perception cannot be rebuilt by pumping money, especially when there is no money. But the isolation isn't limited to proxies. The regional picture is also turning against Iran. Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, are quietly distancing themselves. They're not openly supporting the US blockade, but they're not objecting either. Riyadh sees Iran's weakening as an opportunity for regional balance. China, Iran's biggest trade partner, is not saying a word. As long as Beijing's own ships pass safely through Hormuz, it's not intervening in the blockade. Beijing, which called Tehran a strategic partner for years, has left Iran alone in the moment of crisis. China is only thinking of its own interests, and its interest right now is not saving Iran. Russia? Moscow can't even look up from its own internal chaos. The war in Ukraine, general purges, economic pressure. Putin has no hand to reach toward Tehran. So Iran is now alone, both inside and outside. Proxies are asking questions, allies are retreating, the Gulf is watching, China is silent, Russia can't help. Iran has never been this isolated in...
Has everyone been seeing that Putin might be in trouble in Russia? They might be kicking him out. They're having a lot of trouble up there financially.
In its history. This unprecedented isolation on the outside is tearing apart the very institution...
Actually, in a way, this war has helped Russia a bit because of the price of oil being up, but I don't know if it's enough to save them.
The regime relies on most, the military itself.
It's like a banana
According to
pancake.
informed sources, the Iranian armed forces are facing
It does.
severe shortages of supplies.
Now, inside the studio app, it has different emojis or than it does outside of it. Like if I'm on regular Rumble, it has different emojis.
Rising desertions and deepening friction between the regular army, Artesh, and the Revolutionary Guards. As the fighting intensifies, the military system is coming under increasing pressure. The details of this report are horrifying. Let's examine them one by one. The 20-round crisis. Logistical supply lines have been so severely disrupted that some frontline units are being issued only 20 rounds of ammunition for every 2 soldiers.
Oh, give it about a month. In about a month, it'll probably be down about $1
20 rounds, 2
per
soldiers.
gallon.
This is a number that would be insufficient not just in a war, but even during training. Exercises at a police station. An automatic weapon fires 10 rounds per second, meaning the combined firepower of 2 soldiers lasts exactly 2 seconds. But the ammunition shortage is just the beginning. It is reported that field units in some regions are operating without access to reliable drinking water or sufficient food
Pat,
supplies. No
It takes some
weapons,
getting used
no
to.
water, no food. On the 12th day of the war, the soldiers of a 1 million-strong army are being decimated by hunger, thirst, and a lack of ammunition.
It does take some getting used to.
Under these conditions, it is physically impossible for an army to maintain its loyalty.
I tried to do a row of those jumping ones, jumping jack ones there, or whatever it is, but it did them all separately.
The bloody rift between the Artesh and the Revolutionary Guards had opened. The biggest point of friction emerged regarding medical support for wounded soldiers. Regular army units suffered significant losses, yet Revolutionary Guard personnel flatly refused to transport wounded army soldiers to hospitals, despite having access to medical facilities. Citing shortages of ambulances and blood supplies, they repeatedly turned down the army's requests for assistance. Let's focus on this detail. An army abandoning its own wounded to die is proof
Any word on Lincoln coming back on the video part?
that military cohesion has collapsed at the most fundamental level. Artesh and the IRGC, Iran's 2 armed forces, are no longer fighting as a unified whole. They view each other as enemies. This division is structural and historical. Artesh is Iran's conventional army, units inherited from
They're not as strong as the RIGC, and they're not as ruthless. And that's part of the issue, but it would cause them some trouble because some of them have left.
the Shah era, filled through mandatory conscription with relatively weak ideological ties. After the 1979 revolution, the regime never trusted
Yeah,
Artesh.
it's kind of small.
It established its own ideological army, the IRGC. The IRGC, meanwhile, is the regime's ideological guardian, a privileged, well-equipped parallel army managing economic empires worth
I hear ya,
billions of
yeah.
dollars. Construction companies, banks, ports, airports, all are under the IRGC's control. For 47 years, the
The only 2 things better is with Winkin, you have to individually start, put all this stuff in, the key, and all that kind of stuff, and you have to manually start and end it on that. And the other thing is chat can't come up on the screen, to go to all the platforms. Those are the biggest differences.
IRGC has always been treated as first-class citizens, while the Artesh has been treated as second-class. The best weapons go to the IRGC, the best salaries go to the IRGC, the best hospitals go to the
And that's why there's some division there too, not even counting the other divisions.
IRGC. Now, even as the regime collapses, the IRGC prioritizes the technical maintenance of its missile systems, that is, preserving its strategic weapons capabilities, while starving its own soldiers, while abandoning its wounded to die. This is a command mentality that places the machine above human life. And this mentality has brought the anger that has been building since February 28th to a breaking point. Artesh soldiers know the IRGC didn't send ambulances while they were drowning in their own blood, and they want revenge. And then the uprisings erupted. Harsh conditions and a situation perceived as neglect by commanders led to mass desertions. soldiers abandoned their bases and sought refuge in nearby towns. They are fleeing in groups, no longer individual desertions, but a
In August, someone else is buying it. Is that why, Marianne?
mass wave of desertion. The Revolutionary Guards attempted to mobilize reserve forces. Result: a complete fiasco. Most of those called up did not report to military centers. Instead, some took this as an opportunity to take their families
At my age, that time goes fast.
and flee toward border regions. In other words, the mobilization order, rather than strengthening the military, actually accelerated civilian migration. The regime
He's selling it, right, in August?
said, "Come and fight," but people replied, "We're leaving, heading toward the border." The failure of the reserve mobilization shows that the regime's manpower crisis has reached a point of no return. Active duty
They're now putting 12-year-olds out there and women.
troops are deserting, reservists aren't showing up,
Okay,
and those who do
thanks,
are
John.
rushing toward the border. The regime cannot even find people to fill its own war machine. This is a sign of the collapse not of an army, but of a state. And perhaps the most shocking detail: the crisis is not limited to the Artesh. Even within the IRGC missile units, traditionally the best resourced units of the Iranian military, reports of communication equipment failures and shortages of food and basic supplies are emerging. Even the missile units, the regime's crown jewels, its most privileged and best-equipped forces, are starving and cut off from communication. Commanders are prioritizing the delivery of technical components necessary to keep missile systems operational over sending food or personal equipment to the troops. They are protecting the machine, not the people. It is acceptable for a soldier to go hungry, but a missile cannot be left unmaintained. This mindset alone explains why the Iranian military is falling apart. The regime does not view its own soldiers as human beings, and the soldiers know this. They know the IRGC doesn't send ambulances while they're drowning in their own blood. They know that while technical parts for missile maintenance arrive, no bread comes for them. And this knowledge is accelerating desertions and defections even further. Iran is no longer acting as a country. It has turned into a battlefield of warring powers and a crushed people. The IRC wants escalation, but its credibility has collapsed. Diplomats want negotiation, but have no authority. The people are revolting but unorganized, and the US is waiting. Because waiting is Washington's most powerful weapon. The US didn't attack Iran, it made Iran attack itself. And this may be one of the most ingenious strategic
It is in a lot of trouble from within.
moves of the modern era. But a cornered regime rarely plays rationally. How seriously the
If their internet was really on, they have internet, but it's only inside Iran, and it's amongst the durka ones get it.
IRGC's escalation push is being debated in Tehran, we don't yet know. How Artesh commanders will respond to the "army is with the people" chants, we don't yet know. The regime has 14 days ahead, but the regime does not have a decision-making structure that can get through those 14 days with one voice, and the clock waits for no one. So what do you think? How does Iran get out of this deadlock? Can the regime survive, or will it collapse from within? Share in the comments.
I think it's going to collapse. It looks bad from everything I'm being told. All right, here's the news report on that boat that tried to go through. Now, this boat tried to get through for 6 hours, and we ended up shooting it and knocking out their motor, their engine room.
Yeah, guys, good morning. I just spoke with President Trump for about 20 minutes, and he told me if Iran does not sign this deal, the whole country is getting blown up. He went on to say that bridges and power plants will be targeted if Iran does not sign this agreement. The president,
And if they do sign it, anyone there that goes back is going to be killed.
telling me that U.S. Special Envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are heading to Islamabad, Pakistan for meetings on Tuesday, possibly into Wednesday, to try and get this agreement across the finish line. The president telling Fox News this is a very simple deal, but this is the last chance for the Iranians. The president very clear in our conversation that he is not making the same mistake that President Obama made, giving cash to the Iranians and allowing them to continue a nuclear program. The deal on the table is to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to ensure that the Iranians do not have this highly enriched uranium that is buried deep underground after Operation Midnight Hammer last summer. And again, the president telling Fox.
Oh, I forgot to bring up the thing that who's that sent it to me? Pat, were you the one that sent it to me? Let me see if I can find it quick because I had it open. Come on, there it is. Let me drag this over here about the shooting. Let me do that first. 8 kids killed in a mass shooting, but I seen something in here about it being domestic in nature. What was it, like a father killing his whole family, or I'm wondering about more details on it. From 1 to 14 years old, it sounds like maybe the father killed his family or something like that. You know, I don't know. Maybe a big family. It doesn't really give any names or anything other than that. If anyone else finds more out about it, let me know. Let me bring this back up. Here we go. So it's interesting, but I don't know if it's like crazy, like a trans or something killing people.
News that the entire country will be blown up. Bridges and power plants will be targeted if the Iranians do not sign this agreement. This is a significant development because we are in.
No one wants to go. They don't want to be the one to do the signing. And even if they sign, I wouldn't trust them as far as you can throw them, you know?
This less than 72-hour window before the ceasefire.
They do sign, it's going to cause more division inside their country, though.
Fire between the United States and Iran expires. And the president has given the Iranians an opportunity for an off-ramp, an olive branch. He is extending to the Iranian regime to avoid this region going back into war. And the president said the United States military is prepared. He said the U.S. has massive amounts of ammunition, even better.
100%, Pat. It's worse than it's ever been with the mental health. I kind of wonder if it's some of the other stuff, food they're giving us and all that kind of stuff.
Munitions than they had in the opening days of Operation Epic Fury to use against the Iranian regime to target a variety of different positions across their country if they are not willing to make this good faith deal. And again, he tells Fox News that his special envoys are headed to the Middle East and they are going to try and get this deal across the finish line. But this is in the hands of the Iranians if they are willing to make a good faith agreement. And if they are
what do you do if they sign it and they still won't let you in there without, going in with weapons to get the uranium?
The president has indicated there will be significant strikes against the Iranian regime in response if this.
Pat, I'm going to show you. It was a European family. Oh, okay. You're talking about the shooting and the thing, yeah?
Diplomatic effort does not succeed. Guys?
Trey, in your conversation with the president, it hasn't been talked much about lately, but there has been focus on Karg Island.
It was one of the Iranian ships, a cargo ship, trying to run the barricades, and they cat and moused around for 6 hours before eventually they just shot the engine room to disable the boat.
Because of its strategic proximity to 90% of the crude oil goes through there, did the president raise, I know he's talked to you about bridges and power plants, but what about the oil infrastructure?
The president talked about the Strait of Hormuz and these violations of the ceasefire that were conducted by the Iranians yesterday. President Trump telling me about how they're using these small vessels to fire on ships in the Strait of Hormuz.
It was a black family.
But they're just using small ammunition. And despite the fact that they're not doing much damage, it's an indication that they are violating the ceasefire. And then the question is, well, why are they not doing much damage?
Yes.
And that is because more than
Yes, Iranian cargo ship of some sort. I think they were trying to carry weapons into them. And they got shot. The engine room got shot. They warned them they were going to shoot the engine room so they wouldn't kill anyone, which they didn't. So they got out of the engine room. They disabled the boat. Then they boarded it. And now it's in our custody. And it looks like they weren't just doing oil. They were also trying to transmit weapons to them.
150 Iranian vessels are currently at the bottom of the sea. During Operation Epic Fury, the United States hammered the Iranian Navy, and they had prepared for a possible confrontation with the United States, but not enough, because the U.S. was so successful in these strikes that much of the Navy vessels the Iranians had prepared were not able to be used. And that is the reason that they have to use these smaller vessels to threaten international shipping lanes. And again, this speaks to the success of Operation Epic Fury and just the inability of the Iranian regime to even respond and to violate the ceasefire in this manner. And so that is one of the key pillars of this broader agreement that President Trump is demanding the Iranian regime sign. They are going to keep open the Strait of Hormuz. They are going to release that highly enriched uranium that is buried deep underground in the aftermath of those U.S. strikes last summer. And they're going to stop threatening U.S. forces across the region, the president tells me, or the Iranians are going to pay a heavy price. And that price is going to come at their power plants, their bridges, and the remaining infrastructure belonging to the Iranian regime. The president said right now there is a divide between the hardliners and the more moderates within the Iranian political leadership that remains. Remember, in the opening strikes of...
There's a lot of fissures in that. There's a lot of different groups in there that are fighting with each other inside the Iranian group.
Operation Epic Fury, the United States and Israel took out the command structure of the Iranian regime. Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, was taken out in an airstrike along with his top advisors. The Iranians were in disarray in these moments after...
I mean, rotten hell. He killed a lot of his own Iranian people, hundreds of thousands.
Operation Epic Fury began because they were hit even harder than anyone in the region believed they were going to be hit. And again, this speaks to the inability...
Some Muslims are black, not all, but if you're from Africa, the Muslims there are black.
...of the Iranians to not only defend their top leaders, but also...
in some parts of the Middle East as well.
So, defend their military structure. When we think about the threat Iran posed before Operation Epic Fury began, they were basically trying to get a nuclear weapon. They told negotiators they had enough highly enriched uranium for 11 nuclear bombs. And this was an indication to President Trump something had to be done to stop this regime.
Pat, the next video I have was going to be about the shooting. So hope you're back in about 5 minutes.
From obtaining a nuclear weapon. But remember, you have this threat from the Iranians that also includes ballistic missiles and drones. And as part of Operation Epic Fury, President Trump ordered strikes against the production facilities of the Iranian regime, hammering their ballistic missile production centers and the drone centers that were used to target U.S. forces and allies across the Middle East. And now President Trump tells me that bridges and power plants are back on the target list for the United States. And if Iran does not sign this agreement in Islamabad this coming week, the president will order strikes, he tells me, against power plants and bridges inside of Iran. This will be a major escalation, but the president told me, and he is expected.
I think that if that's going to happen, it's going to happen like Friday or Saturday, because he's trying to make them run out of the oil money and being able to pump it.
We also learned in that conversation to release basically a letter today to the Iranians with this tough talk, letting them know what is at risk for their regime if they do not make a good faith agreement. The president told me this tough talk is the only thing the Iranians understand. They don't understand the traditional diplomacy and dialogue of the region. They understand firepower, the firepower that belongs to the United States military. And President Trump again told me they have massive amounts of ammunition prepared. If the Iranians are not willing to make that good faith agreement, they are going to hammer the regime, targeting those bridges, power plants, and what is left of the IRGC military infrastructure.
Guys? Trey, you were on our show in an earlier hour before this phone call with the president, and you and I discussed this regime. You say that there's a faction, perhaps a more moderate versus a more radical wing of this regime. We don't know which one is in charge. Maybe you do. Maybe you can let us know. But if the more radical wing is in charge, per our discussion earlier, then that means they're crazy. And that means that this letter,
I didn't know it was a Scottish word.
Escalation may not have the results that we want because they don't care. They're just like, fine, let it all go. This is existential. If, we're going to lose. So let's all just die and go to heaven, I guess, or hell. So did you discuss that with the president in terms of the mental state and the outcomes that the mullahs and the radical wing want?
Yes, and I can tell you, having talked to the president multiple times throughout this war and prior to this conflict, the president understands exactly who he's dealing with here. These are not traditional negotiators on the other side of the table. This is not a traditional regime. Even on our call today, President Trump brought up the protesters who were slaughtered in the streets of their country earlier this year. And the president multiple times said he would be there for them. And he targeted, actually, during Operation Epic Fury, many of the besieged force commanders and those responsible for the crackdown against Iranian demonstrators who were peacefully protesting.
Marianne, do they use that word over there a lot?
In the streets of their country. But again, I think the fact the president continues to bring this up, he understands two things. He understands the Iranian population, more than 90 million people, and many of them are quietly supporting what President Trump is doing, pressuring a repressive regime.
Pumped over here means you got muscles. You pumped up your muscles. It builds up your muscles.
Regime that spent 47 years cracking down on their own people. But he also understands the negotiators, and he understands the break in who's actually calling the shots here. And it's a great question because even the Iranians are not clear on who is calling the shots. And while you have this divide between the hardliners and the more moderates, even the Iranians can't agree on their own position. We heard Iran's foreign minister late last week saying the Strait of Hormuz is open, and then IRGC commanders saying it's closed, and then yesterday firing on these vessels trying to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. And again, this speaks to the successful U.S. strikes against the regime and the command structure of the IRGC. But as it relates to who is at the negotiating table now, the takeaways that I had from this 20-minute call with President Trump were quite clear. It doesn't matter to President Trump who is calling the shots in Iran right now. What matters is that they signed this agreement. And the president said if they do not sign the agreement, he is going to target Iranian power plants and bridges. He is going to increase the strikes against the IRGC and go after the core that remains within Iran. Because he told me this is a very simple agreement. It could be done in 10 minutes. They know what is on the table. All they have to do is sign the dotted line. And so far, they've been unwilling to do so. And that is why President Trump told me that on Tuesday, U.S. Special Envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are headed back to the Middle East to try and get this deal across the finish line. And remember what we are looking at here. Now we understand. After this conversation with President Trump, I can tell you very clearly, we are looking at option A or option B. Option A is that the Iranians come to the table on Tuesday and they sign a good faith agreement that never allows them to have a nuclear weapon, that makes sure they give up their enriched uranium.
I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them backwards.
And ensures that they open the Strait of Hormuz. Option B is that their power plants and bridges are going to be destroyed by the U.S. military, the strongest military in the world. And so they have a decision to make. And the president was very clear just before we got off the call. He told me Iran has a decision to make. And the decision is either going to be an off-ramp that saves the lives of the leadership and the infrastructure of the country, or the alternative. And the president told me he is prepared for both options. And again, he is sending his negotiating team for one final effort to try and get this deal across the finish line. But the president was very clear. He told me if they do not sign this deal, the whole country is going to get blown up.
Trey, it's Lucas. Great reporting. Vice President Vance led the negotiations.
A lot that he's saying to use it as leverage.
Last weekend in Islamabad. He is not going on this trip to Islamabad. Why do you think that is?
It's a great point, and I do want to just read something to you right here. As we are talking, the president has now posted on Truth Social about exactly what he told me during that conversation. He says, in part, Iran decided to fire bullets yesterday in the Strait of Hormuz, a total violation of our ceasefire agreement. Many of them were aimed at a French ship and a freighter from the United Kingdom. The president goes on to say, that wasn't nice, was it? My representatives are going to Islamabad, Pakistan, confirming what he told me on the phone earlier. They will be there tomorrow evening for negotiations. Iran recently announced that they were closing the strait, which is strange because our blockade has already closed it. The president goes on to say in his post, they're helping us without knowing. And they are the ones that lose with the closed passage, $500 million a day. Now, it's a very long post on Truth Social, and we'll pull it up here. But the president later says, no more Mr. Nice Guy. They will come down fast. He's talking about the bridges and power plants. And again, that is what I gathered from my conversation with the president, that he is not playing games here. He is not bluffing. He is going to hammer the Iranian regime if they do not sign on the dotted line. The choice is theirs in the days ahead.
Can you respond to, I know the Truth Social came out and we didn't get an answer to the question of why you think J.D. Vance is not included in this negotiation team.
The short answer is we understand that the vice president is still directly involved in these conversations and consultations. The president just yesterday at the White House held a situational assessment in the Situation Room, gathering top cabinet officials, whether it was the Joint Chiefs Chairman, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, the vice president, and others. And we understand that U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff was involved as well in that conversation. And so this is a full court press by the Trump administration. A variety of officials are involved at many different levels. The United States is preparing not just on the diplomatic front, but also on the military front. And as the president has made clear on Truth Social and in our call earlier today, he is prepared for a variety of outcomes. But we are looking at two outcomes here, either a diplomatic solution or military action.
Big decision. Trey Ying.
Yep. All right. Now I wanted to show you, hopefully Pat's back. This is when they engaged the ship, and they played cat and mouse with it for over 6 hours, trying to get it blocked because it was trying to get through. Several ways it tried to get through. It tried to go around other ships to get through and all this and that. It was a cat and mouse. They ended up shooting it, and this is the warning and all that before they shot it.
Motor Vessel Tosca. Vacate your engine room. Vacate your engine room.
Did you hear that? I'll play it again. They tell them to get out of the engine room because they're going to disable it. They're not going to sink it.
Motor Vessel Tosca. Vacate your engine.
You see, this isn't an oil tanker. It's carrying supplies. A lot of it's weapons. It turns out it was weapons.
Vacate your engine room.
They were desperate to get this stuff to Iran.
Prepared to subject you to disabling fire.
Oh, and they're also bringing money too. But
okay, we gave the flare. Now we're getting. Be ready.
So they disabled that ship because it was bringing bad stuff in. Let's put it that way. I forgot exactly what this was.
Things are not going according to plan for Iran. Inside or...
Oh, I already played this one. Okay, I had 2 copies of it. I didn't realize I did. Okay, let's move on to some of the other stuff that I have. Let's go here. This is
somebody got stabbed here.
I believe this one's is this in England? If I remember correctly. And then they try to cover it up.
Somebody got stabbed here. We're down Connolly Station. Right here's a little bin of floor cleaner, lemony floor cleaner. And why are we doing that? All right, so we're out front here. Looks like these are a pair of bloody shoes. I don't know if these are part of the stabbing or what. Looks like blood to me.
Trying to find the.
I heard somebody got stabbed up there.
No, there was nobody stabbed here.
Nobody was stabbed here?
She's lying.
I thought that's what I saw on the news. Really? Oh no, I'm fine. I was just on. I saw on the news somebody got stabbed here. That's a rumor. I saw a video. Did you see the video?
Trying to find that video.
I don't know what the hell's
I swear I had it.
Okay, sure.
I swear I had that video of the blood and all that, and I can't find it. Did I play it the other day? I don't remember. Let me see if that's the farmer thing. That's that's the other attacks. Huh. All right. I don't seem to have it handy anyways. Okay. I'll move on. Let's go to this one.
Some are calling it genocide. From Kenya to Syria to Pakistan, Muslim fanatics are slaughtering Christians. While Western governments have been slow to respond, activists are answering the call. Eric.
That's why if Iran goes down, the support of spreading that will go down by 90%.
Stackelbeck recently spoke to a nun who's on a dangerous mission to help persecuted Christians.
The Islamic terror group ISIS is leaving a trail of destruction across large parts of Syria and Iraq, with a specific target in its crosshairs.
Hundreds of thousands of Christians have been displaced from their homes, and countless others have been murdered or enslaved by the jihadist armies of ISIS, with no end in sight.
Sister Hatun Dogan has been on the ground and witnessed the devastation of these ancient Christian communities. She's listened to survivors tell how Christian and Yazidi women are being sold into sex slavery.
They choose the most beautiful one, even if they have small child, and they sell these girls, these ladies,
catch up on
to
Chad
each other.
here.
They don't sell to another religion, only to Sunni Muslim. They think there are 12,000 kidnapped in the hand of the ISIS Yazidi alone. What is going on there, what I was hearing, is the highest barbarism on the earth in the history till today.
Her foundation helps the poor and persecuted in 35
Fake
countries,
news.
providing them with
That doesn't surprise
food, clothing, medicine, and shelter. She travels constantly, with a special focus on the Muslim world. The rise of ISIS has frequently brought her to Syria and Iraq to help the region's beleaguered Christian minority.
I'm coming here not for holiday. I'm coming here because I like to bring the voice of the voiceless, that the world hear their voice. They don't have voice more. I am the channel for them. That is my mission.
Sister Hatun is no stranger to Islamic persecution. As a young girl, threats from local Muslims forced her family to leave their home in Turkey. They relocated to Germany, where she operates her foundation and sounds the alarm about the gathering Islamic storm.
The mission of Baghdadi, of the ISIS, is to complete the world to Islam religion and to bring them to Dar es Salaam, they call that. And Islam is not peace, please. And who says ISIS has not with Islam in connection or something like this, it's not true, he's liar. ISIS is Islam, Islam is ISIS.
She's disappointed by what she calls a weak reaction from the West.
We know according to the Quran, no democracy.
A lot of times when they're going to kill you, they make you dig your own grave.
Till this verse is no democracy. Islam democracy is opposite, like black and white. And that I hope that America will understand. America has today the power that they can stop this disaster on the earth with another Western country.
As for Sister Hatun, she says she'll keep calling attention to the plight of followers of Jesus around the world, whether the West wants to hear it or not. Eric Stakelbeck, CBN News, Washington.
Yep, that's why Iran's important. This is Iran right here as well. This is the older protest that I was thinking of. More on that. Let me delete that and get back into my other folder right here. Okay.
In South Africa, if you're white, you have a target on your back, whether you live on a farm or whether you live in the suburbs. In 2011, they brutally and savagely murdered my wife's grandfather. They did not ask where he was born. He was born in Austria. However, when they saw the color of his skin,
I agree.
They did not ask where he was from. They savagely tortured him, strangled him, burnt him, and then murdered him. Before they did this, they also raped his wife in front of him to death.
Now, this is just because of their color, not because of being Muslim or anything.
Yes, several men raped her to death. So living in South Africa is not for the faint-hearted. The ANC government goes out and continuously calls for the killing of the white minority. Now, not only the white men are suffering, but the women. There is basically no women's rights. Every 3 minutes, a woman is raped in South Africa. Countless infants below the age of 2 years old are raped on cultural beliefs in South Africa. Animals that get stolen or hacked to death alive. The cattle industry is also suffering because these guys go out and butcher animals while they're alive just to get meat and to fearmonger the farmers on their farms.
They're stealing there too.
Before they attack a house in the suburbs, they go and they poison the dogs, putting the dogs through absolute misery and pain. It is tear-jerking to think what is going on in my home country. And here I live in America as a refugee, and I've got safety and pleasures of life that my fellow South Africans cannot fathom. You know, being a house owner in America, I actually own a house that hasn't got a 10-foot fence around it, which feels weird. And nothing seems to be changing in South Africa because the government doesn't want it to change. They want the white man to suffer. They want the white woman to suffer. They want the children to suffer. They are killing the language. They are killing the people. And what they are standing for is ungodly and unethical and immoral. And I honestly believe that Cyril Ramaphosa, Julius Malema, and the ANC will be held accountable and need to appear in front of a jury on accounts of crimes against humanity and against the white minority in South Africa. We will not cease until this happens, because God will prevail and evil will come second. Now, you know, you've got the woke liberal in South Africa who are basically like the band on the Titanic ship. They will play music and think everything's honky-dory until everyone is dead. And then they will come begging for help. So disregard the people in South Africa that say the Rainbow Nation is fine. The Rainbow Nation is burning to the ground.
Yep. Okay, I did find that one about the stabbing here. And they're trying to cover it up. I guess this is in England or Ireland.
Dublin is safe tonight. Great for tourism.
It was in Ireland, I believe.
Come on down to Temple Bar and dance with the leprechauns. That's right. Actually, tonight there was a stabbing just up these steps and the escalator into Connolly Station, downtown Dublin. If you want to see the video, be advised it is quite graphic.
Yep,
it was
that's
taken
the
from
cleansing.
inside a train about 2 hours ago.
But it's okay. It's not racist if they're doing it right, Marianne. It's not racist, right?
As the doors opened, and what you can see is a pool of blood up there in the landing.
Kill the bear, and that's the white.
Many questions. This is a developing story, and I rushed over here. I was filming, ironically, a reel downtown at these bars, asking people what they thought of immigration.
I wouldn't want to
And
go there.
a lot of the younger guys, a lot of the college crowd said that
Problem is, a lot of people have farms, and that's the only place they can live.
they thought it was just
You
grand.
can't sell the damn
you know,
things.
no big deal. But again, as you can,
What's happening is they're killing the farmers and taking their land, and they don't know how to farm, and a lot of people are starving now there.
see in this video that I just posted, I was told by security that that's just a rumor tonight, and nobody was stabbed. I was told, well, verbatim, nothing happened.
Twist on
That's a
words,
rumor. Okay. While I walked up there and watching the video, I walked over directly to the same soda machine, an area where it happened, and I saw a janitor mopping up. And after that, I saw some of the drug users up on the steps there afterwards come and tell me, oh, did you see the pair of bloody shoes at the top of the steps? I said, no way, you're kidding me. So that's also in my latest video. And sure enough, there's a pair of black and white Nikes covered in blood. Now, I don't know if that's totally related, but it is very, very time sensitive in that it was a pair of bloody shoes at the front of the entrance of Connolly Station about an hour after the video dropped. So I don't know. You can only draw conclusions, I guess. It's speculation, but you know, seems a lot like Tucson, Arizona. Nobody really knows what's going on here. I haven't seen any police show up. I did see a couple guard eye cars driving around, okay, and other than that, apparently the station closes down anyway, so wasn't able to really get.
I did see the videos of the blood all over the place, but I didn't download it because it was pretty graphic, and I wasn't sure I could play it.
An interview of any eyewitnesses inside the station, or
it almost looked like they slaughtered someone. Like it was almost like the amount of blood you'd have for a beheading, almost.
That were on the train. So none of the security guards were available for comment. They were just preoccupied in.
Oh, Colin, they're trying to not let this get out there in England. They're trying to go after people for posting it and everything. They're trying to scrub the internet.
Ensuring that I got out of the station, and yeah, we'll see. I don't know how reliable some.
2C TV was trying to report on all the immigration. You know, France and England are working together to get them on those boats and sneak them into England, trying to get more illegal Muslims in there.
Drug users' information would be over there. I mean, I doubt they saw anything happen. They were probably out here doing drugs the whole time. So,
boatload of weapons.
Yeah, please pray for Dublin. My goodness gracious. Who's to blame here? Fianna Gael, Fianna Fáin. So as you can see, what's
then they arrested 2C TV people for reporting on this, believe it or not, in France. And they held them in jail for like 8 hours. They tried everything to keep them from reporting on it.
No, I'm recording a video here. So I can give you a smoke if you want. 1 second, I'm recording a video here. I appreciate it. And yeah, so apparently some guy got stabbed up there on the train earlier. Some guy got stabbed to death on the train. There's a whole pool of blood, yeah. Yeah, just 1 sec. Let me finish this video.
Some of the posts I've seen that I didn't play is it looks like they're speculating, a lot of people, that they were beheading him. And that's an Islam thing.
So that's the report from down here, and it's just tragic.
And it looks like there was more than one people involved doing it to him.
There's a lot of fellow Irishmen that want to get real close to me and try and touch me, but you know, yeah, just please stay back from me, sir. I'll tell you 3 times, but so. Yeah, I don't know. It's a shame that these Irish.
You never know if they're a nutcake, you know.
People, these Irish citizens, you know, they have to live like this, while asylum seekers, you know, they're probably up in warm restaurants tonight eating food. It's just tragic to see. Meanwhile, the politicians here will tell you that Dublin is safe.
And not one news outlet in England are reporting this. Not one. Not one. It doesn't fit their narrative, I guess.
Better than ever. Sounds so familiar, doesn't it? America. How about Philadelphia? How about Washington?
Not even a peep about it.
Washington, D.C. Did not Donald Trump himself come in and clean up the capital city? This is the capital city here, Dublin. So what shall we do? What shall we do? Ireland, America. Will you take help and support from the Yankees? Or just continue on burying the truth? Stay tuned for more. This is an exclusive report. Kevin Posobiec, field correspondent for Human Events.
I don't know. Colin, if you get more information on this, let me know.
What do you call?
This is about Senator Chris Murphy. He goes over to Spain and he starts trashing America over there. He's real leftist.
American senator goes in Spain and says this.
Want to bring you greetings as well from a nation that is in crisis. I'm not going to sugarcoat the gravity of what we face right now in the United States. This is the most significant threat to American democracy since the Civil War. Donald Trump in our country is trying to end our democracy. We are not on the verge of a totalitarian takeover. We are in the middle of it. He is trying to seize control of our courts, of our law enforcement, of our media, of our elections. His goal is oligarchic.
If he was a dictator, you wouldn't be standing there talking.
Capture.
That Senator Murphy, Democrat senator, that went to Spain in Europe and trashed our president. Look, don't get me wrong. You have your right to have your own opinion. But you know, I was taught one thing when I grew up. You don't wash your laundry outside. You wash it inside. So he's not the first one. If you remember a few months ago, Newsom did the same thing. How? What kind of people? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, yeah, use the laws that we have. You can say your complaints here, but you don't go overboard over what is it called? Whatever, fuck it. Go to Europe and trash your own country. That makes you look bad. Like for real, that in my opinion, if somebody does something like that, I believe that person is below anything, even a little bug over there. Because that tells me everything that needs to tell me about your personality.
Yep, it is. Okay, spot on. Wealthy. Well, I'll just play it and then we'll talk about it.
So buckle up. Here's what I think they've done. I think our countries in the Commonwealth have been short-sold because of government debt. And if you've ever seen the movie The Big Short, there's a few other movies around about how they do this. Essentially, the globalists, the big families, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, Soros, Gates, Bilderbergs, all of them, they devised a plan because they knew the collapse of their fiat currency system was coming because it has a shelf life of about 99 years. It's all built on debt. They devised a plan over a very long period of time that would see them bet against us, bet against their own nations. I think that was the involvement of the World Economic Forum. They taught them how to bet against themselves by betting on their own failure as nations economically, and then engineering that failure as nations economically. Firstly, by the big health shock, like an oil shock, but it was a health shock, wasn't it? The pandemic, locking us down, forcing the closure of small and medium-sized businesses, then the big corporations owned by the kinds of people who are behind this plan, because they're just winning all over town with this one. Then we've got the oil shock crisis, and then we've got the never-ending climate hoax crisis. They've essentially bet on our collapse.
That bull crap.
Now, the job of the politicians who are now paid $750,000 and $1 million every 12 weeks in expenses to pull this off, this crime. It's a crime. It's the biggest conspiracy the world has ever seen. The politicians are there to provide justification for you as to why we're going bankrupt, as to why we're spending all this money, as to why they are engineering the collapse of our nations with
it's really a power grab.
Social justice programs, DEI programs, gay tennis in Tanzania.
They got to break us to get full control.
Whatever they can do, you can see it all over social media, and it's driving people into rages. But these people don't care. They don't care that they've damaged your health. They don't care that they've taken all your savings. They don't care that they've taken your houses. They don't care that they've taken your jobs, and they absolutely don't care that they've taken your countries. So the politicians are apologists for this giant conspiracy where the money, the few, because with all this social justice stuff, they're such hypocrites because they talk about the greater good. They did it during the pandemic. There's no greater good. These politicians are working, obviously, for themselves. They get nicely paid off, but for the benefit of the few, the wealthy few, because they, the wealthy few, have first betted against us, bet on our economic.
Well, it's not just a matter of being wealthy. It's ones with no morals.
Collapse, and then used our politicians to make sure it happens.
And no morals. Okay, this judge lets this guy out, so ICE has to re-arrest him. He's a real bad dude. The judge he's got a real record, and they let him out. And you wouldn't believe the left goes left trying to keep him from being detained and taken away by ICE.
A Panamanian national involved in a class action lawsuit against raids in Los Angeles is rearrested by ICE during a routine check-in. The arrest of Isaac Villegas is raising concern with local activists and his lawyers.
They're alleging he was targeted in an act of retaliation by federal officials. KTLA's Mary Beth McDade live in
If he's here illegally, deport him.
Hollywood with details. Mary Beth.
Yeah, Mike and Jer were told that Isaac Villegas was arrested yesterday morning in downtown LA when he went for an ICE check-in and then later in the day transferred out to Adelanto. Well, tonight, his supporters are fighting for his freedom.
Release Isaac! Release Isaac!
Community
He's illegal. Deport him.
members, civil rights leaders, and attorneys are calling for Isaac Villegas to be freed from federal detention. Villegas was rearrested by federal agents Thursday. His lawyer, Stacey Tolchin, says during a routine check-in with ICE.
He was arrested yesterday morning when he went up to report for ISAP, which is the Alternatives to Detention program.
Tolchin believes the arrest
How about
is
this? Get him out.
retaliation because Villegas is a plaintiff in a class action lawsuit challenging the immigration raids in Los Angeles. Villegas is one of several day laborers who was arrested by federal agents last June in Pasadena while waiting for a bus.
This is one of the main litigants in the national raids case that went to the Supreme Court, and he's now being penalized for asserting his rights and for asserting the rights of all of us so that we're not targeted unconstitutionally.
Tolchin says Thursday's arrest is a violation of an immigration judge's order last summer when Villegas was released on bond because a judge found that he wasn't dangerous or flight risk. She says since his release, he has been checking in with ICE regularly.
The law prohibits an arrest unless there's been some sort of a material change in circumstances that renders him a flight risk.
I think she's full of crap.
And there has been nothing.
DHS says
deport him. He's here illegally.
Villegas was rearrested after multiple violations of his supervised release, including missing required check-ins. And they say,
see? Bye.
This criminal illegal alien has a rap sheet that includes felonies for forgery and fraud. And
see? Goodbye.
And a misdemeanor for driving under the influence. In response to this latest arrest, Tolchin has filed a habeas petition in federal court challenging Villegas' detainment and demanding his release.
Can't fly him out quick enough for me.
And Villegas' attorney tells us that the government has 7 days to respond to that habeas petition. For now, reporting live here in Hollywood, Mary Beth McDade. We're going to send it back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Mary Beth.
Okay, I'm going to end with this next one. This is about them, the left, ripping us off and still trying to. Watch this.
Not just a small amount of inefficiency. Are they 9 times less efficient at their jobs? Or are they doing something else? 9 times
money laundering,
less efficient at their jobs? Or are they doing something else?
And they're aligned with China.
And if it's not trade, what else are they doing here in Canada? I think it bears reminding folks that
armed guards seen at a Chinese energy project in northern Alberta. It's one heck of a sentence.
Yep, Marianne.
Guys, it's happening. A report has just dropped claiming exactly that. And instead of immediate answers, we got the usual performance from Ottawa. Silence, confusion, a whole lot of, don't worry about it. Yeah, because nothing says normal business like banned rifles showing up in the middle of Canada's most important energy zone, right?
And if it's not trade, what else are they doing here in Canada?
So let's start with what actually triggered this. You had a truck driver, someone on site, not some random Twitter account, a truck driver reporting seeing 3 guards carrying what he identified as AK-47 style rifles with large magazines. Not hunting rifles, not basic security gear. Weapons that are explicitly restricted under Canadian law.
The driver said
and they're trying to take all the guns away from all the people other than hunting rifles.
3 armed guards remained in shadowed areas. When he asked his escort about them, he was told they were with Petro China and not to ask any further questions. Citing his military service, The driver identified the firearms as automatic AK-47 assault rifles with what appeared to be at least 30 round magazines.
And these guards weren't just standing around casually either. They were staged, positioned in shadowed areas, not interacting and not visible, unless you were looking really, really carefully. And then when the driver actually asked about them, he was told very clearly not to ask questions, and that they were, and I'm quoting here, with pro-China. That alone should have set off alarms at every level.
The Chinese are highly interested in our oil and gas. They have been trying to diversify for a number of years. For all the times I've been there, they've always said we'd like more of Alberta's oil.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. In Canada, private security can't just walk around with prohibited weapons. That's not a gray area. That's not open to interpretation. Magazine limits exist. Firearm classifications exist. Enforcement exists. So the obvious question then is kind of simple. Who allowed this? Who signed off on this? Who looked at a foreign-linked operation in the heart of Alberta's oil sands and said, armed personnel with restricted rifles, that's totally fine. And probably the most important question, why is nobody out there actually trying to explain this?
Don't you think that Communist Ottawa is leveraging Communist China against Alberta?
Because if this was false, if this was exaggerated, if this was misunderstood, if this was fake news, you would shut it down instantly, right? You'd have a press conference, you'd have enforcement agencies that were clarifying everything. But instead, we got nothing. No denial, no confirmation, just silence. And I'll be honest here, that silence, that's louder than any statement that Mark Carney or Ottawa could put out. Because when something is completely baseless, governments are usually going to move fast on that. And when something's inconvenient, they move a little bit more carefully.
And now we have reports of China's influence expanding into the Alberta oil fields. Yes, you heard that right. We now have news of some guards, alleged armed agents in northern Alberta.
And again, this is not happening in some random location. This is Fort McMurray. This is the center of Alberta's oil sands. This is the engine that drives not just the province, but a massive portion of Canada's entire economy. So now let's zoom out a little bit, because this doesn't really exist in isolation. China didn't show up yesterday. China poured over $60 billion into Alberta. $60 billion. That's not a small investment. That's not...
They're trying to do that here in America, too.
Passive interest. That represents nearly half of all Chinese investment in the entire country of Canada. Half. And it's concentrated in one specific place. Alberta's oil and gas sector. So when people act all surprised that China has a presence there, I don't know what you've been watching. But what you got is this. You have a Chinese state-linked site that is involved, and there are allegations of armed guards with prohibited weapons there. You don't just brush that off as a misunderstanding. You start asking, who's actually in control here?
Is about breaking and shattering the enemy. And they're not sitting here looking at us saying that we are friends.
To the Chinese Communist Party, you're not an ally. There's no real allies to China.
And this is where Mark Carney and Ottawa start to look completely out of touch. Because while Albertans are being told that they got to accept restrictions, accept climate caps...
100% agreed there, Marianne.
Accept pipeline delays, all of that going on.
They do want to control the world.
Foreign capital is being openly welcomed with open arms right into the core of the energy sector. Chinese state-owned companies are not just buying oil. They're operating within the system. They're part of the infrastructure. They're part of the production chain. And strangely, nobody in Ottawa seems to think that creates...
Almost 30% of it they own already.
...creates any kind of risk, or that's any type of environmental problem. So let me make this really simple. When a foreign government-linked company is embedded within your most critical industry,
they see it as an investment in a way to get a lot of their drugs are starting to come across the border from the north now.
It's not just business. That's influence. And when that same country is one of the largest buyers of your oil, especially through projects like the Trans Mountain Pipeline, well, then it goes beyond influence and it starts turning into leverage. Because now you're not just selling oil, you're aligning your production with their demand.
It's very clear that the tariffs and the anti-dumping investigation that's being imposed on our canola growers is a direct retaliation by China to the EV tariffs. Our canola growers and our producers know that. We need our federal government to step up and support them at this time.
And here's the part that nobody in Ottawa wants to say out loud.
They're buying it because they're paying on politicians. We got the best politicians they can buy from us.
China doesn't invest like they're a tourist. They don't throw money around randomly. They play long term. They identify stable regions, they identify high output industries, and they identify predictable supply chains. And I think it's safe to say that Alberta checks every single one of those boxes. You've got a stable democracy, you've got massive reserves, third largest on the planet, and you've got consistent production. That's exactly what a country like China is looking for when they want to secure long-term energy supplies. So when you see them moving from...
That's kind of why Trump would like to get those two provinces that have most of the oil in them.
Buying oil to investing in oil to positioning themselves within infrastructure, that's not an accident. That is...
Alberta and Saskatchewan.
Progression, stepwise up the ladder. And Mark Carney standing there acting like this is some sort of normal diversification. It's kind of insulting at this point, honestly. Diversification does not mean that you're handing strategic influence and you're handing over keys to a foreign state. Diversification means that you're reducing dependency, not creating new dependencies.
And I urge the federal government to get back at the table and resolve this issue immediately and provide immediate support to our growers at this time through the money they're generating off those EV tariffs.
And then we get to this line that should make everyone pause. Chinese investors, and again, I'm quoting here, stand ready to participate in whatever pipeline format that Canada wants. Now, that sounds cooperative, right? That sounds really helpful. But my friends, let's break that down a little bit more. If they're ready to finance pipelines, if they're ready to invest in petrochemical expansion, if they're ready to pour private equity into energy infrastructure, then what exactly are they getting in return? Because nobody invests billions of dollars without expecting some level of influence, right? Nobody's going to fund infrastructure without wanting a say in how it's going to operate. And once you start tying up your pipelines, your production facilities, your long-term contracts to one major foreign partner, you're not just doing business anymore. You're building dependency into your system.
The driver said 3 armed guards remained in shadowed areas. When he asked his escort about them, he was told they were with PetroChina and not to ask any further questions.
And here's where the jokes kind of write themselves. Ottawa is out here restricting Alberta internally while opening the doors externally. Pipelines within Canada get delayed, they get debated, they get blocked, and they get regulated to death. But when foreign investors show up with cash, suddenly everything becomes flexible. Suddenly, let's talk partnership. Let's talk about global cooperation. How does that make sense? Now let's talk about the part where this stops looking like business and, again, starts looking a little bit more like pressure. Because the second that you bring trade into this, the whole thing becomes a little bit clearer. Canada is hitting China with EV tariffs, and then what happens next? Well, China responds with a nearly 76% anti-dumping duty on Canadian canola. Not random, not accidental, targeted. Alberta produces about 6.4 million tons of canola every year. That's not a small number, to quote Strongbad. That is not a small number. That is a big number. And a duty like that is a direct hit on the exact same province that is already tied into their energy supply chain.
On behalf of his communist masters in China, right, was to jump up and down and have a hysterical little hissy fit and say that, you know, we're engaged in treason and that real Albertans don't support independence. I mean, it was the most ridiculous display of on behalf of a premier that I've ever seen. He should be embarrassed, really.
So now you've got a situation where China's investing into your oil, they're buying your oil, and at the same time, they're now holding leverage over your agricultural sector over this canola oil duty. That's not just trade, that's pressure from multiple directions. And Mark Carney's just standing there talking about balanced relationships. all while what's actually happening feels a little bit disconnected from his reality, his truth. Because what kind of balance are we getting here? You have one side that's investing, buying, and then punishing when policy doesn't go their way. And here's a pattern that you really can't ignore. First, China's building economic ties. And then they increase dependency. And then, when there's friction, they apply pressure. It's predictable, it's simple, it's strategic. And yet, Ottawa just keeps on acting like this is normal market behavior. If this is normal, then explain why the retaliation lands exactly where it hurts Alberta the most. Because that's not coincident. That is political and economic calculation.
Could you imagine living up there and paying 70% taxes right off the top to other provinces if you were in Alberta, and then you got to pay your regular taxes besides that. So your effective tax rate is like 85 to 90% of your money. And then they just raise their gas taxes up there.
So, Mark Carney, let's bring you directly into the conversation, now, because you can't talk about this situation that's going on now without talking about the policy decisions that allowed this situation to happen. The federal government of Canada has been actively re-engaging with China. Trade missions, meetings, concessions, dealings where the EV tariffs all get softened in exchange for agricultural relief. And who's sitting in on those meetings? Chinese investors who are being sent directly to the Prime Minister. That's not passive diplomacy, folks. That is active facilitation.
I understand that's upsetting to people, but they need to understand that Albertans are done. We're leaving, and there's no more conversation to be had. I know that's upsetting to people.
Do you believe?
You see why that they want to split away from Ottawa?
Okay, let's break down some of that. So first off, he says Albertans are leaving. I hear a lot of that kind of tone. And in reality, I think mentally it would be better for Albertans who want to separate to maybe hope to separate, because looking at the numbers, they just don't look like they're there. And you're setting yourself up for real crushing defeat. If Alberta doesn't separate, then you feel like you're trapped.
So all while Alberta is being told that you got to slow down your energy expansion because of meeting climate goals, at the exact same time, foreign capital is getting the red carpet rolled out, and they're being welcomed deeper and deeper into that exact same industry that Alberta is being restricted in. That contradiction's not that's not a small contradiction. That is the entire problem in a nutshell. You're restricting your own producers, and then you're opening up the door for external influence. That's not a strategy. That is blatant hypocrisy and mismanagement. And, I keep saying this, I keep asking this because nobody in Ottawa seems willing to. Are you trying to strengthen Alberta, or are you using Alberta as a bargaining chip? Because from the outside, it looks like Alberta is producing the value. Ottawa is negotiating.
60% of is what we pay the government. Yeah, probably if you add all your taxes together, they start out at 90%, and that's right off the top. That goes from the western provinces over to Ottawa and that kind of stuff. Then you got to pay all your regular taxes, and you got to pay for fuel taxes. They got a carbon tax, a new one that went in, 25 cents on the dollar or something like that. And they sell stuff by the liter there. It's real expensive.
Negotiating the deals, and then China is the one securing the long-term advantage. That's the structure that's forming here.
So we really need to unite together, fight back against, as he says, the communist Ottawa government.
And it gets even worse when you realize just how much direct coordination is happening. Invest Alberta officials, they are literally on the ground in Beijing and Hong Kong, building relationships, bringing in investors, arranging meetings. And Chinese investors, they're coming into Alberta. They're looking at petrochemical projects. They're looking at private equity opportunities. They're looking even at tourism.
Because they've got the money to pay for it, and they've already bankrupted a lot of the people there.
Developments. That's not a small footprint. That is a broad expansion across multiple sectors that's tied into one central pivotal asset, energy. And now let's add in another layer to this, because we just can't stop doing that, can we? The security concerns that have already been raised in Canada over the past few years. You have reports of Chinese police stations operating in cities in the east, like Toronto, Montreal, a diplomatic presence that's now matching the United States.
And they already already have Sharia courts as well. So they have both those things going on.
States, the country right next door in numbers, despite the fact that they're doing only a fraction of the trade that Canada does with the United States. You had a diplomat that was expelled in 2023. You have discussions around United Front networks that are operating inside the country. And none of this is speculation, folks. These are documented concerns. Look it up.
You have this so-called diplomat who was actually blackmailing a member of parliament who is of the Chinese diaspora. The guy's a Canadian, but his family came from China, and that's what those people are doing here. They got the same number of diplomats that the United States has in Canada, and yet they do 9 times less.
So when a country with that kind of track record is also increasing its presence inside your most critical industry, Mr. Carney, you don't get to pretend that everything's fine. You don't get to brush it off as simple trade. And yet that's exactly what you and everybody else in Ottawa seems to be doing. Downplaying, redirecting, and minimizing. Because acknowledging the full picture would mean admitting that control's not as strong as you claim. And this is where Alberta's frustrations start to make a lot of sense. This is not just about one report or one policy. It's a pattern. Alberta generates billions in energy revenue. And that money, it supports federal programs across the country through, wait for it, equalization. And yet, Alberta doesn't get any equalization payments in return, do they?
That's the thing that they use, is this equalization payments, because they've got all the illegals a lot in the Ottawa area, and so they take it from the West to pay for to get all those illegals in there to keep getting the Liberal parties back in power and control the whole government.
Carry all of the economic risk when oil prices drop. They're the ones who are dealing with job losses during downturns. They're the ones who are managing boom and bust cycles. And all the while, the decision-making power, that sits somewhere else.
You're right, Marianne. I think I did, or I got one saved, a video about there wasn't any taxes up until the Civil War, and then a little while after the Civil War, there was no income taxes. They ended it again. Then they put it back in place under Woodrow Wilson, I believe it was.
So imagine watching all of this unfolding from within Alberta. You are seeing foreign state...
I know I seen that video. I don't know if I saved it. Maybe if I didn't save it, I'll go find it again.
State-owned companies operating within your oil sands. You see China in...
Trump is talking about possibly changing it so there will be no income taxes, and it'll all be by tariff. So if you buy something from another country, that's how that's where the taxes would come from. Not when you buy something locally from an American company.
Increasing both its investment and its demands. You see trade pressure actively hitting your farmers. You see Ottawa openly negotiating deals overseas. And then, as the coup de grace, you hear about armed guards, and nobody explains it properly. At what point are you finally going to stop trusting the system?
Is leveraging communist China against Alberta? I mean, come on. I mean, we live in the world of reality.
You can tell this guy here with the headsets is a leftist. He's all for it.
Politique,
you don't mind being a pawn in that fight?
The core issue here, folks, is control. Who decides what happens to Alberta's oil? Is it the people in...
They need emergencies to spend money, too. They want a money launder.
Alberta, who actually stand on top of that oil? Is it the federal government thousands of kilometers away in Ottawa? Or is it the foreign investors who are increasingly tied into every part of the system by design? That's not a theoretical question anymore. That's a legitimate, real question we need to know. And this is exactly why the independence conversation is growing. Not because people are chasing slogans, but because people are asking practical questions that deserve answers. If Alberta's making its own decisions, then they can set their own rules for foreign investments. Fine. They could enforce their own security standards. They could decide which countries are going to get access and how much. They'll be able to negotiate directly instead of being filtered through federal policies and priorities. Ottawa, I'll leave you with this question. If Alberta's resources are this darn important, why are you making it seem like, or maybe why is it that you just are,
them in Saskatchewan is the cash cow for the whole country.
Having someone else set the terms? That's a good question. You better think on it, and you should be given an answer soon. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Thanks so much for hanging out, everybody. You know what to do around here. Like,
100%, Marianne, about the fraud. And they want it to keep flowing too. That's why they want to keep the power, because a lot of that's money laundering, Marianne. Okay.
Subscribe, share with.
Anyways, I should be on tomorrow at 5 p.m. unless something comes up. 5 p.m. Eastern. Okay. I think I'm gonna try to. I got a lot of clips. I just want to play a lot of the backlog of clips actually. So I don't know what I'm gonna name it or this or that. Unless something big happens in the news, we'll see. I doubt it. Not until about Thursday or Friday that we'll kick off. And if we're going to end up bombing, it would happen. I think he's going to squeeze them enough to not let them get oil through, and then they'll have to cave and this and that. God bless everyone. Take care. Bye bye. See you tomorrow.